I think in general, that's what you'd want to be going for. So we had a series of films, including Silent Running was our first one, the 1972 film, and that one actually was a closed screening with it. It was like a trial run that we attempted back in April, and we actually did a post-screening Zoom call with our group Film East, which is the young film programmers group that we actually facilitate ourselves here in Norwich. And then after that, we did more public sort of wider screenings, including Local Hero from 1983, Bait, the Mark Jenkin film from last year, The Elephant Man, we did Made in Dagenham, Top Hat, the 1935 Fred Astaire film, and Election from 1999 with Reese Witherspoon. And then our final one, which was in June, was Slow West, and that was in conjunction with the industry webinar with John McLean, the director. So what we did with those ones is have a hashtag on Twitter, and if people wanted to tweet along during the screenings, they could. And then afterwards, we sort of had dedicated Twitter conversations. And I guess in the end, what happened was we sort of ran out of steam a bit, and really what we decided, having looked at the levels of engagement, was that they didn't really work in the grand scheme of things. There was a lack of uptake, and there was not much engagement on Twitter, and really it became more of a kind of a echo chamber type. You know, it was mostly us lot, that the adults, facilitators, not adults, that's, you know what I mean. We weren't actually the intended audience. It was more kind of the facilitators were back and forth with each other, and that's why we dropped it, really. And I would be interested to hear about your experience as well. I think there'll be a chance after I've stopped talking and then towards the end. But it would be interesting to hear if you have had the same experience with this kind of online screening. So now I'll just talk a bit more about the private online screening, like more of a film club sort of style of running things. And this can be much more successful. And we haven't been doing this with our young film programmers. We might suggest it as something we can do before cinemas are really properly up and running again. But I've got personal experience of this in a different group. It's an Australian film club that I've been part of, which formed it in March. It's actually the London Australian Film Society, I think they're called. They have a festival that they run annually, and they do lots of screenings at the Regent Street Cinema. So there's this group of people. Some of them are academics, some of them are geeks, but maybe that's a bit, I don't want to be insulting. They are aficionados of Australian film. But I just wanted to talk to you about this because it's a very successful group and engagement is high and it's very organized. So I'm just going to sort of run through that process. It's really, it has an effective facilitator. So he's very proactive, he's very organized, and we have themes every week, and it's a regular Tuesday night screening at 8 to 8:30, and So the way it works is that we'll all press play at 8:30. Sometimes we'll have some chat as the film's going. There's a closed Facebook group, which you might want to do with your young film programmers, rather than Twitter. Keep it private. And it does depend on the film as to how much of that goes on. So we've had one week we had Muriel's wedding, and a lot of people have seen that a lot of times, and it's quite light-hearted. So there's quite a lot of commenting. Oh, and last week we actually had a Crocodile Dundee, so that again there was a lot of chat then. But then other weeks there's some very dark films that are very serious or very complex, and you don't really want to be commenting I don't want to be commenting or if I haven't seen the film before, I want to kind of watch it properly. And then the thing about that club is that after the film finishes, most people that have done it will then click the Zoom link and we'll do exactly this, what we're doing now, and we'll have a chat about the film, but other things as well. And it's the social bit, it's the more organic kind of, it's the bit that your film programmers might be missing. Obviously we haven't been meeting in person, so rather than the Twitter thing, which is kind of faceless, and it's also, there's a lag, isn't there? So you don't have that kind of conversational thing going on. I kept pressing refresh with my screen, and it's just a bit awkward because you can't always find the comments and what's the latest and so on. So before I stop talking, I just want to talk about that process of that film club. So there's sort of 7 steps which seem to work. So once there's a theme for the week, the facilitator posts on the closed Facebook group the theme and invites any nominations from any of the group members. And then he will shortlist from those nominations, but he'll do that by looking at what's available. And I've completely forgotten to screen share. I was going to show you certain things along the way, but I've forgot to do that. But I think I will just show you one thing that I was going to hang on. So there's this website. I don't know if you're familiar with it. It's called Just Watch. And what it does, you can put in film titles. I put in Hunt for the Wilder People, and it shows you where you can watch it, and for how much. So you can check the different streaming platforms. And this is just a point of usefulness for facilitators. So what he does then is he'll go back to the closed Facebook group, and he will post the nominations and invite voting. It's a very democratic process. Mm-hmm. And if you do this with your young film programmers, they'll feel part of that process, and that kind of, that they're actually influencing the decision making. But he has a voting form that he does via Google Docs. And he'll have obviously the film titles, a brief synopsis, an image, so that you give them all that information that they need, and also information on where they can watch it. So that might, sometimes we actually have premium titles. We watched a film called Little Monsters recently, where we paid, I don't know what it was, £7 or something. But people need to sort of have that option it will influence whether they vote for that title or not. And then after a couple of days, he'll close the voting, and he'll see what the winning options are, and then he'll announce that on the Facebook group. And then on the evening, we have the screening, the comment along on the Facebook group if you're into that, and then the Zoom chat, at which point we suggest themes for the following week. So it's like a cyclical process, and that seems to work for that group. So yeah, it may be something that you want to adopt for your group. I will just show you something else. if I can find it. Maybe. Oh no, I won't, because it's a PDF and it's a bit tricky to find. But Julia sent me a PDF of some instructions from Cinema for All, which is a quite a handy sort of how-to guide with watch parties. And I'm sure she could even maybe post it in the chat or something just now, or I could after I finish speaking. But also Guy and I have discussed writing our own guide. So if there's a demand for it, we may well do that and offer that out. And I think that's all I have to say. So do you want to take questions now, or?
Yeah, I think so.
Comments?
Any comments? I mean, thanks so much. I think that, you know, you talking about the regularity and the availability of the titles, but also, I mean, I think it's a good moment for people to raise their hand if they've had a good experience of a watch party. Hands up if you've actually been a participant and enjoyed it as a participant and been more than just watching it, but actually participated in the watch party.
That's
maybe just do, has anyone done that?
Two hands I counted.
2 hands. And maybe, would anyone like to say anything about that? What made it good, you know?
Yeah, all I would say was I don't know if anyone was aware of Carol Morley's Twitter thing that she did from the beginning of lockdown. Carol Morley, the director, and she did one on Twitter, and it was basically about women directors. That was her theme, and she dug out amazing films which were free to stream, and they were from across, you know, they were from sort of 50, 60 years of filmmaking, a really wide theme, but obviously it was Carol Morley, so she's got a community already, and it was a strong theme because many of the films were ones that wouldn't have been seen otherwise. So it was, and that was a tweet along thing. So, but there was a definite, very nice feeling towards the end of that, and she closed it down in October or whatever it was, March to October. So it had a life, and she made badges at the end of it but it was just a very nice mood. But it sort of had a shelf life, so I don't know if it would have continued, you know, in the same. But it was good.
Did anyone else have a good experience they'd like to share? I mean, I think the badges sounds amazing. It's amazing, that sense of being part of something. I will post the film club thing when I get a chance, and I've certainly, all of the things that everyone's been talking about, there'll be a resource about running a successful film club or online watch party, but also any other resources that I gather will come after this session. But yeah, is there anyone else who has had a good experience?
Well,
Nick,
I mean, me personally, I am part of a film club, but you can't do it as a watch party because people are in different locations around the world. So we just watch it when we can and catch up when we can. And also access in different places around the world. Some things are available on Netflix or not in wherever, Sweden or Belize. So that's a bit difficult. But the Just Watch looks like a good platform to have a look at. But I did want to ask about your young programmers, because we're about to do our first, hopefully, watch party. We only started our group last week because we've recruited apart from 2, we've got new recruits. And about access, really, I was looking at the suggested list of what we're looking at. Obviously, one's on Netflix, one's BFI Player you can buy, the other one you've got to subscribe free, and I don't want to force them to get into subscriptions and things like that. How are you dealing with that? Obviously, I would reimburse them if they have to pay for different films, but how do you get over that?
I'll just chip in there. Yeah, that was a problem. I mean, and ultimately the recommendations from Melanie this week, because they weren't free, it became more of an issue to do it as a watch party. And I think obviously we can look, and in the webinar, we'll have another list of free options from her on Thursday. But it was just a timing thing, because I think you're absolutely right. But we also, that sense of maybe, you know, the recommendation, the link that Anna was saying about Just Watch and then doing a vote, that, you know, because it feels sometimes you might want to watch something that you paid for, and it feels a bit hampering to always have it free. But that's another, you know, reason behind thinking each group might run it and have their own criteria, but then they'd be more engaged in actually watching that. But yeah, for sure, needs more free recommendations, but there is,
I mean, our group are under 18, so they're going to have to go and ask their parents.
Yes.
I don't know.
Yeah.
It gets...
Yeah.
And again, so that would be your call to tailor it and, you know, maybe not do it. And that's, again, another thing to think, how is it useful for you? And I think when Anna, Guy and myself were talking before this session, the sense of it being a Zoom chat afterwards, rather than this public tweet along, would actually be much more beneficial to keep your group coherent, in having a laugh together, and ideally learning a bit more about film.
No, I know. And a lot of them don't do Facebook. They don't, you know, it's finding.
Yeah. Guy.
Can I just quickly say something on that? Because I think that was something we found quite quickly, was that the thing that the young programmers that did get involved with liked was being involved in a network, first and foremost, when everyone wasn't sure how lockdown would affect them. But also we explicitly asked them whether they liked the idea of a set time for a screening, and that was something, the structure was beneficial to the people that did engage with it. But also, I think, as we've now looking back on it, but also doing other projects and talking to other people who do online events of any kind with any age group, is what people are what is most important to people is, like Anna said, is the live interaction, the feeling that you're interacting with other human beings at a set time. So I think anything that supports that, that's why I liked, I mean, I hadn't heard all the detail about how Anna's Australian Film Club works, but that idea of involving young people, if possible, right from the get-go, in terms of voting on the themes and the choice of films and whether they're prepared to pay for it. Because we had to, because it had never been done. I almost used the word unprecedented, and now I did it. But right at the beginning, there was no rule book, was there? We didn't know what would work, so we just tried. But especially with young people, it's really hard to get them to put their head above the parapet and right at the beginning. And I did an event yesterday, and only 1 out of 8 young people had their camera on. They were all wanting to be anonymous. So but what did kind of draw them out also, I would say, was the reviews, giving them the option to sit and write a review and submit it, and then put that on our website. Surprised me, actually, because, you know, you assume that young people don't want to sit around writing about films, but they did. And that's something that's really taken off. And it's actually led, I would say, to the Film East group that Anna mentioned. It's actually led to this blog now, where they're getting submissions from all over the country of admittedly kind of later teenage years, but submitting essays about film. And I wouldn't have expected that.
That is a really interesting point. And I think what your experience about them taking over the ship is obviously the dream position. But again, that balance of you facilitating, because there was safeguarding issues around if you just let them get on with it. So all of these things, and we'll gather everyone's comments. There'll be more time for chat and watch parties at the end, but we need to move on to VOD now. But we'll gather all of these top tips and send that out as a kind of tip sheet, I think, as well. So thank you so much, Anna, to starting us off with free watch parties, and whether or not you're going to use that as a string to your bow for your young programmer group. Let's lift it out of just your young programmer group for a moment, and thinking about how online is also a way to reach more audience that might not come to your venue, but actually in this period find a way that you can curate for them without them having threshold anxiety. So I'm delighted to welcome Carmen, who advocated for young programmers, one of the first venues in the Southeast to start before the network got going, and has been supporting it for a long time, but also with her sort of venue hat on, how she worked with the New Climate to do at-home recommendations. There was a strand that they did during lockdown, which was amazing, which curated streamed films for people. I think they weren't all free. I think that there was a choice there within some that were paid for. And now they're festivals that she's moved to signposting, and lots of venues have said how this moment has actually given access to festivals for the first time, when before they felt quite excluded, certainly young programmers. But I wanted to ask Carmen, for those venues who wanted to make some money out of streaming online, how easy or difficult that was, and also that relationship with distributors when Film Bank, and if a young programmer wanted to actually do an online screening and make some money from it, how they might even go about it, because Film Bank replied saying, we're not doing single licenses online. So there was a bit of a dead end for some venues on that. So I'm going to hand over now to Carmen to just take us through a little bit of her experience of video on demand and anything else she might like to add. Thank you.
Hi. I think I'm going to ditch my presentation because I thought I was speaking to young people.
Oh, sorry.
Very young looking. You're more my young looking age. And I'm sure you all know what VOD is, so I don't want to embarrass myself or any of you. So I can probably keep it quite brief. But just to explain what I did when the first lockdown started, I immediately started curating something called Depot at Home. And I very much did that the way I programmed for Depot. So I created, I think 6 or 7 different categories. And under that category, I curated, I started off with a set of 5 films per category. In the beginning, I was changing those every week. So I was curating about 30 new films, because I thought within each category, people would then have a choice. That's actually quite a lot of work, because of course I couldn't just signpost people. I also had to tell people what the film was about. I then became I was the only person working, so I also became the marketing officer. So to learn how to do everything on the website and, you know, create pages for all these films. That was a huge amount of work. It took up about 3 days each week. After maybe a couple of months, or maybe a bit less, I then decided to just change one of the films. So I had a little tier of films and then change the top ones and would drop off the bottom one, and would also reflect that on the website. And basically, and I would imagine you all have the same experience, a lot of our friends have got Netflix subscriptions or Amazon Prime, and it's hell finding a good film there, especially if you haven't got the kind of breadth of knowledge that we have. So people end up searching forever and then are still watching a film they don't like. The algorithm still is not working to our advantage. It pinpoints you to the most popular films, which are often a bit trashy. So with that in mind, I thought, and I had a fantastic feedback from that. That people really every Thursday when this came out, they would look at my list and pick their films for the weekend. So that was great feedback. I also carried on with the live event stuff. So NT Live, of course, put a lot on online, and some of the other platforms as well, or the other venues. So I kind of carried on as I did. Quite tiring. As I say, it did take up a lot of time, and also I was kind of doing that on my own without much feedback. So the feedback came much later once we opened again. During that time, I was approached by a number of smaller distributors, of course not the big distributors, but the smaller ones like Dartmouth, like Modern Films. They were very keen to engage with cinemas. Of course, the bigger distributors did their own thing and put things on their own platform, popular films on their own platform. But smaller distributors contacted me fairly regularly about some deals. So what was great about that was that they had the streaming platform, And all I had to do was say yes, and they would create a page with all the different cinemas that were participating. I would advertise that in my weekly newsletter as part of this curated program, often would make that the headline film. And then anybody who would come, so on that page, if they click to the film on that page, hopefully they would then choose Depot Cinema. And that way the distributor could then find out where customers came from, and I would get a percentage of the takings. So in principle, very lovely model. The deal was kind of 10% or 30%. 10% is completely negligible. And a few times I've also said, you know, just please keep the money. It's kind of embarrassing to invoice for £7. I did films like White Riot, The Atom, A Love Story. Can't think of the top of my head. So kind of niche, smaller films. And to be honest, it's only a small audience picks that up. I ran White Riot for quite a long time. Maybe in total I had 13 customers for that. Patrick Bliss contacted me. He was the first one to put a whole festival online. So I supported that too. I think I had around 10 of our customers, and our newsletter goes out to around 18,000 people, I think. So it's quite a large number. And from that, really small. So really, in terms of making money, I don't think this is a way forward. It's very much a way forward to keep your communication and your relationship with your customers warm. This time I was furloughed, so I was very worried about that relationship. And then I was already going to be the one venue for Cine City Film Festival. When that was part of the festival was going to be online. Cine City, you may be aware, they clubbed together with Bath, Cornwall and Cambridge Film Festival, and they created this online film festival called Amplify. Within that, I was going to screen 4 films live, have 4 previews, which were all sold out already, so that was a bit of a bummer. But then, of course, I was very happy to support the whole festival online. So great, as I became furloughed, I could recommend Amplify, which was running for 2 weeks, I think. So it's a nice period of time and would take people at least through half of this period. It finished last Sunday. Oscar Bright has got a little festival for a few days. And there were, I put Luxor on. Who was that with? That was Modern Films again, I think. So I put some individual films on. So I put a whole program on that I thought would cover this month, and we're looking to open next Thursday again. So I've kind of managed to get through this. But in terms of money making, Glasgow Film Theatre, they've just today launched their Glasgow at Home. So that means that they manage their own platform. They're selling films for £7.50 a hit. We, of course, all know that people watch films with more than 1 people. So it's relatively cheap to watch, to stream a film. Yeah, it's kind of generally thought that at least 2 people will be watching a film. But you still have to pay your distributors. So to be honest, I don't know what that deal is. Barbican has done it too, and they feel that it's an advantage. Home haven't done it. Watershed, I don't know of any other independent cinema who've done it. Glasgow Film Theatre tried it quite a long time ago, and that fell flat. But this time they've kind of revived it and given it sort of new branding. Their branding is not very strong, but they've got good films and a very loyal audience. So they think that this will work for them. We don't have the capacity to set that up, and it's quite an expensive platform to run, which I think will then need, well, really 2-3 days of dedicated attention to curate and to, make it look nice and all that kind of stuff. So it's not where we're going, and I also can't see that would be a very beneficial income stream. So here we are, looking forward to opening next Thursday.
Thank you. There's a question from James, Carmen. And I think you probably answered it in a way. Was £9.99 too high a price for the rental, do you think?
So yes, thank you for that question. So I was looking at a lot of the free films, and you do hit a bit of a dead end quite quickly. So my range was really from Netflix and Amazon, where I found mainstream films, to Curzon, and of course Curzon has set up their online platform already a long time ago, and that runs very happily alongside their theatrical releases. I also have to say, personally, I don't feel any threat from video on demand. I think there's a huge need for people to congregate and watch a film together. Nobody, no film addict can go to the cinema 7 days a week, maybe unless you're one of us, but it's not, we're on a huge minority. So if people come, our customers come 1 day a week, the other 5 films, they have to be seen online. So I think that's fine, personally. Curzon, and I was a bit worried about it. I was worried that people would contact me about the cost. Curzon charges up to £11.99, so between £3.99 and £11.99. And I think people sort of think that, if they watch it with the two of them, it's a £5 each. I think it works better for the Curzon films because they're often, really well publicised and quite big films. I think the smaller films like The Atom, A Love Story struggled.
Yeah. Well, I know when I spoke with Ellen from the Queen's Film Theatre in Belfast, and we'll come to that in a moment when we talk about live streams or your venue iPlayer, but very similar conclusion that £9.99 got a very small audience because it was just too prohibitive and not a money-making scheme. However, she was saying that they would do a free film for 24 hours. And that was something they found was really successful because it was a short window of time. It created that kind of buzz. But essentially, yeah, that video on demand was good for accessibility. So for making it more accessible for audiences who can't get to the cinema, and they would continue it for that reason. Also for a good platform for emerging filmmakers. So it would be a cheaper hire, and they might, use it that way, and we'll come to that in the next session too. And also for, I can't remember what the third thing was. There was the accessibility, it was for emerging filmmakers, and I can't remember what the third thing was. I'll have to come back to it. So is there...
To be honest, I found this time around that in the first lockdown, I really held people's hand, and felt this time around that I had shown the way, and that people could hopefully sort of, start looking around themselves. And on the first lockdown, Mubi, I don't know if any of you engaged with that, but they offered free membership for as long as lockdown lasted for all our customers. So a lot of people discovered Mubi, and I worked a lot with the Curzon films as well. So actually Curzon didn't give anything back to our, the exhibition industry. They got all my 20,000 customers just like that. So I also felt a little bit like, everybody knows that connection now, and I don't feel I need to support that any further.
Are there any questions, Carmen, around this subject or anything else? Corinna.
Sound. Hello. So impressed with blooming 18,000 people subscribed to your newsletter. Did you actually get lots more because of doing this, or were most of them there before?
No, I don't know the answer to that question. I will ask my marketing manager this afternoon. That's a good one. Yeah.
Okay, over and out.
I want to say two things, actually. Those rainbows, it looks really ridiculous, but that was real, that picture behind me. It looks like I made it up, but that was a real picture that somebody took and sent to me, the golden pot. And also, I'm just Carmen and not Natasha. We had a Zoom meeting because we received, I'm just going to boast a little bit. We had a fantastic Green highest achievement for commitment from Julie's Bicycle, if any of you know that. It's a really challenging award, and I was very pleased that we won it against the Almeida Theatre and the Lyric Theatre. So yeah, that was so I'll need to take Tasha off.
Absolutely.
Our Green ambassador, so she was there.
I love the optimism of it. There's a question from James, also saying it's worth a read, or maybe just a flag up that there's gives figures on virtual release by Film Forum in New York City. Ranges from $599 to $80,000 for 50 films released online. I'm not sure if that's good or bad or what, but maybe.
All right, well, yeah.
Might comment on that, but thanks, James, for that. So, and thanks so much, Carmen. I love the positivity. And will you continue once we are in the happy moment of April and maybe back to normal? Will you continue doing recommendations, or will you phase that out?
I've phased that out.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
I haven't got time.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and I think that's interesting, again, you know, the fragmentary nature of people wanting to program their own viewing, whereas initially in lockdown, a sense of a watch party, but then it fragments. So obviously the cinema comes back into its own. But if we can somehow, use that watch party. The other thing I was mentioning that QFT said is there was an international audience for their iPlayer. So that was the other thing. But again, I guess locally in your venues, what's the priority for that kind of thing? But obviously it's a festival, and we'll move to Peter now.
Larushka's got a question.
Oh, thank you. I missed you there, Larushka. Larushka, go for it.
Thanks, Carmen. It was just a quick question, which is when you did the people signing up to the platform where you created the page, was it within a set time period? Because would people find it better if you said, like going to a cinema, you have to log on at 8 o'clock to watch a film at this particular time? Was that something you tried? Is that something people respond better to, you think, when they know that they've got to do it then?
So I did some things where there were Q&As, so they were time specific, but it was kind of more a pinpointing that I did, and from there people. So there were certain with a Q&A, and then you can watch it without a Q&A. So I just gave all the details and then left it for people. So I didn't do the watch-alongs. The WOF Women Over 50s Festival usually happens here, and that was all online, and Nuala did watch-alongs. So again, I advertised that too, but I then left that to Nuala to organise. And again, it was incredibly hard work for her, and she did sort of the chat at the same time, and also found that she was the one all the time trying to make that happen, and was quite exhausted after a number of months. So she did it every week, and really, really interesting films, and she got into other interesting kind of colleagues to collaborate with her, but the participation was quite low, was kind of around 10. So a weekly commitment for her quite very quickly. Well, not very quickly, actually. I think she did it until the end of June. So that's a number of months, but it's exhausting.
Also, just another quick question maybe to everyone, not that we want to support them necessarily, but has anyone tried doing a Netflix watch along, because they have that function on Netflix party with their young group?
You know, my daughter did it with her friends, and they chose the most trashy films that I had quite an argument with her about, because it's this awful series where they choose, the participants are young people with a very high sex drive, and they put them together in a house, and they create situations where they have to try to stay apart, and of course all that fails. It was just horrendous. Anyway, as a group of people to watch it and to gossip and to chat, that worked really well, because it didn't really matter what they missed, and they could just sort of go on about, oh, look what he looks like. So, and she did that quite a bit, and she was really not interested in watching anything seriously, quietly, alongside other people. So I thought it was a bit of an eye-opener to me.
I know that Depot Young Programmers attempted one, and they were using exactly that, the Netflix function. But I think they've moved towards making it more of a discussion group next month. So again, how successful it was, maybe it was too public or something, I'm not sure, but that's the only other one I've heard of. Okay. Yeah, so thinking about the advantages of online screenings, because obviously as a moneymaker, probably not very useful, but certainly as keeping your audience alive or connected to you. I know that Ed, who's here today from Bexhill, one of their sort of problem-solving things around not being able to work with Film Bank was actually to set up their own iPlayer or live stream, as they're calling it. So, but I hope he might contribute with Peter. I'd like to welcome Peter to the conversation. He's in the middle of a teaching day, so he's nipped out to have a fag and present in our session. Peter is the director of the Slow Film Festival, which is a film festival entirely curated by young programmers, most of them in their 20s, so not super young. And they also have talked to me about how it had that international advantage. So I'm going to hand over to Peter to talk about how he set up the web streaming on their website for a film festival, which was, I think, young programmers, but maybe not actually. I realise it's not, is it? So I'm going to stop talking and hand over. Thanks, Peter. Hello.
Hello. Well, yeah, I mean, what is young? It's definitely run by young programmers. And just a bit of context for the festival. We run it in a tiny village, and we don't have any, obviously as a festival, we don't have as many overhead costs as sort of physical spaces that are always occupied. And so actually doing an online festival was amazing. I mean, one of the problems with running our festival, so we do experimental film and moving image art and durational cinema. And that often is an incredibly difficult sell to the villagers of Mayfield and East Sussex. And so we always end up having an audience coming from, you know, cities from London, etc. And Mayfield doesn't have a train station. I think it's got one bus route that, you know, the bus comes maybe twice a day. And so it was always a nightmare trying to get people to the festival. And going online was amazing because we didn't have to worry about all of the sort of infrastructural problems that the festival has always faced and encountered. And on top of that, we saved so much money. We didn't have to pay for filmmakers to come over and to do Q&As in person. We didn't have to put them up. And so actually it became, it was just easier to do. It was a far easier event to organize and to run. And we also massively increased our audience. So usually we had sort of maybe 150 people coming to the festival. And this year we had over 10,000 views. And we had, 72 countries, sort of, people from 72 countries viewing the content. And we were also able to actually get sort of bigger names. And these are big names in the experimental world and aren't necessarily huge. I don't know if people know, but we had like Kevin Jerome Everson, who's this, he's had like retrospectives at Tate Modern, etc. It was really easy to get him involved. And we had a Q&A with him moderated by Helen DeWitt at the BFI. We had Ben Rivers. We had a masterclass with Ben Rivers. And it was just, it sort of felt as though it had a dynamism and an ease and an accessibility that we've never had before. What were some of the problems we faced? I mean, the biggest problem, which is perhaps more of a theoretical challenge, was how to instill a sense of place and a sense of venue in the online world, and how to make it feel as though it was a distinct program. And we sort of came up with a cool idea of, we had like a hand-drawn map of the village that we then coded, and there were different venues. So you could click on different venues and discover a bit of the history of the village. And then within each venue, there was sort of video on demand films that were dropped there for 2 days, and were sort of programmed within that venue, but still it sort of had a sense, it sort of minimized how extensive the program looked. You know, one of the problems with Netflix is like there's too much on it. And so when we broke it down into these sort of parcels and into program chunks, I felt that was an easier way into the content while still preserving that freedom of choice. We also did live streamings, which were really good. It was sort of, you know, a lot of what we picked up was that people like the freedom of the internet, but of course also like that, people have mentioned it earlier, that sense of structure. And so, yeah, we had these key live streamed events that sort of every evening, and followed up by a Zoom Q&As. So a live streamed film segueing into a Zoom Q&A. And yeah, it was a really positive experience. And we've just sent around a newsletter, a survey, and annoyingly, people are saying they now want both a physical event and an online event. And so it's maybe in the future. I mean, I think a lot of the team was suggesting that we should carry on doing an online event regardless. And it obviously now comes down to a matter of funding and how we can do both, because you know, and so in terms of the sort of platforms we used, we know that like earlier on in the sort of festival, and when festivals went online, a lot of them were using Vimeo. But the problem with Vimeo is, I think that there are lots of security issues. And so we knew that, you know, when we were discussing with filmmakers, you know, they were saying, you know, we hope you're not using Vimeo. And a lot of the distributors were saying that as well. And so we found this like very niche sort of solution. There's a platform called Video Sprout, and they're cheaper than Vimeo. And they're like, you know, it's really easy to integrate it into your website. And to stream online stuff as well. So it's like video on demand, online streaming. I think it's an American company, so it's like $499 to set up the whole platform. And then there's some data charges. So I think we went over our data cap and we had to pay $50 to cover that. And yeah, it was just really easy. It was so easy to work, and I really recommend it if anyone wants to do online stuff. And then finally, I suppose originally I'd been asked to talk about ticketing an online event, and we didn't ticket this year's festival because we realised that it would we might as well consider it a massive marketing cost to go online. And, you know, we definitely grew our audience considerably. And we were also worried about the fact that, you know, so many, and particularly with moving image and experimental work, there was a lot of free online content that was out there. And yeah, so we realized we'd be competing against that. And so we thought, well, we just can't charge. And on top of that, we had saved so much money by doing it online. And we had already got money from submissions. So actually we broke even. And yeah, we did okay. So yeah, that's as to whether we would ticket next year. I think we'd try to. We haven't quite looked into the logistics of that, but yeah.
Great. I mean, I think it would be really helpful maybe to put the Video Sprout link up for people. Obviously, $500 is potentially too much still for many venues. I'll feed in that the QFT were using Vimeo, and that's another link that after this follow-up I'll send people. They have a whole page on their QFT player, but it was apparently £75 for setup, and then they would add upload hours, like you're saying, and then they mentioned there was another platform called Eventive, which costs £2,000 to set up and looks lovely. So you obviously there's quite a range if you're going shopping for this. And obviously
one of the just quickly about the Vimeo thing. So it depends on what requirements you need. So I think if you're running a full festival, you need to use the it's like, I think it's almost $900 for the Vimeo that gives you live streaming capabilities and sort of multiple channel capabilities. So you can just set up a simple Vimeo account, and that is really cheap. But I think but you can't geo-lock. So one of the issues of obviously of going online is geo-locking content, and you can only geo-lock content through the sort of more expensive Vimeo option.
Can you explain what geo-lock is, Peter?
Yes. Yeah. Okay. So basically, it's sort of restricting the viewing of the video to a specific territory.
Right.
And most, certainly in a festival context, most festivals really keen on premiering, with a European premiere or whatever. And so lots of distributors for the films, just won't want you to sort of stream globally, because then you'll ruin the premiership, whatever rights in other countries.
Yeah. I mean, thank you. That's such an uplifting report of the kind of the great things about running an online festival and all the advantages. Obviously, the issue around, is it a money-making exercise, comes up. Maybe it's like Young Programmers itself, it's a long lead towards revenue. And actually what it does is more is serving that kind of social function of cohering people. And I know a lot of the online clubs that have been running have been like a light in the darkness during lockdown. But going forward, how that connects with international audiences and is making an accessibility. I want to call in Ed from Eddie Izzard, because I know they've set up a live stream, and I think it's Vimeo. So hi, Ed. Don't know if you want to comment on your experience so far, because they wrote a piece for us for the last newsletter about coming up against the barriers of film bank and single licenses, and obviously not having a particularly close relationship with distributors. You were a bit locked out from screening anything.
We were, because it was like we were just looking at it was just turning into a nightmare with all these distributors, like trying to find films in it, because it's just with copyright, and it's like, what if someone pirates it? It's all can just come crashing down. So it's probably about 3-4 weeks ago when the students came up with the idea of the Young Film Festival. It's called Young. So, and it's just basically they would get submissions. We're hoping globally, because we're giving I think it's about a 3 or 4 month window for submissions to come through. And obviously we're making sure everything's all sound with like our legality and stuff like that, and what we can and we can't have, because obviously we're hosting it from the college as well. So as in, it's like a college thing, so there's a lot more kind of restrictions, and making sure that that's all okay as well. But we are hosting through we will be hosting the videos through Vimeo onto, I think it's as easy as like a Wix site is the videos then run through. But we're quite lucky in that we've already got a premium Vimeo account for the college, because obviously with Open Evening this year we had to do all the videos online, and we had like a big site formatted for that. So we're basically doing the same thing with that, because that was really quite successful. Obviously with the opening we had loads and like many thousands of views and stuff like that, so really successful. That was really good for us, that we can then just do that as like a film festival. And in terms of revenue and stuff, this is more just to keep kind of like the film spotters going, It's I think it's a really good way of doing it. So it's a very cheap submission fee of only about we're thinking about £2, and that would grant you access to the entire site. And it's more of just a way to give young film makers like a platform, instead of it kind of being like a money making method.
Yeah.
And I just really hope it goes well.
Thank you. I think it's great. And, and I guess that it's about keeping your young programmers curating.
Yes, yeah, definitely.
In a different form, and obviously building in their creative peers. It's all good for developing your audience. So I guess that's where young programs sort of bleeds out into audience development and working with filmmaking as well.
Yeah. So it's all kind of like good lights for this. It's all seems to be like it benefits those people. So
it's great. So thank you to all the speakers. There's a bit of time now for just general feedback or comments or networking now. We've got about 6 minutes. Sorry, it was 15. Just to absorb all of that and have any comments or questions to any of the speakers. No, not at the moment. Let's have a show of hands at this point from hearing it all. Who thinks that a watch party for their young programmers would be something they might go for? A handful, yeah. Who, again, from this group has considered an iPlayer on their venue's website? Quite a few. Oh yeah, Jess, and maybe Jess come in, because I know you were doing live events in September straight in there, which was one of the few venues that got in on that window. Do you want to say a little bit about where you're at, and what are you going to do an iPlayer?
Yeah, I can. Well, we reopened in August and then closed at the end of October, beginning of November, and hopefully, if we don't go into tier 3, we'll be reopening next week. But in the interim period, we have this November moved to put a load of our content digital, and we are a mixed art centre, so actually it's been led by the theatre programme. So theatre shows that we had in, we're now capturing and putting on as recorded content, and at the moment that's all been free to access, or we've refunded and then made it free because we got some funding from the university to do it. But actually we're now looking to take the tentative steps of, can we put films online? How do we do that? How do we monetize it? As well as this content that we're getting with the theatre. So it's been really interesting hearing what experiences that people have had sort of doing that, and the issues and pitfalls that they've come into. So thank you all for sharing it. The one thing that I've had from our young programmers group is actually they're less interested with the watch parties, but more wanted to be told what to watch, because there was so much out there, and having that sort of curated experience, somebody saying, no, you need to watch this, it's great, and this is what you should do, or how to, and that's why, Carmen, I think it, as you said about we're recommending films, and we did that through lockdown in terms of recommending stuff that was theatre based and some films, and I think I caught some of your tweets, which were really good. But and that we got fantastic feedback off, people saying, oh, they didn't realize they could watch this particularly, and I've redone that with our emails and seen a boost in our emails coming up in terms of sign-ups as well over the last month. Particularly what we've done though is try to recommend things that people could watch for free. So in our last email we did like My 5, Rakuten, I think, was in there, all 4. So films that we had screened previously in our cinema that we found on there to watch for free. And we got some really great feedback from both our young film programmers and our general audience about doing that. So it's just about keeping those engagement levels going in lockdown. And then just going forward now, we're looking at Christmas. I was very interested as well to note that if we do go into tier 3, drive-in cinema can continue to happen. So there is a question mark as to whether we might shift some of our programme to do drive-in as well as digital. So I don't know if anyone else is doing that.
There's a question. Is anyone else doing drive-in? I mean, it's something that I know that is not particularly being funded at the moment because of the costs and the environmental, but obviously it's the way forward. You've pioneered outdoor events a lot, I know, at Gulbenkian, so it is a natural progression. That whole thing about where we're going next is something that if people have suggestions for what they'd like a focus on one of these Zoom networking sessions, please put them in. We have forecasted a few ideas around things like eventizing more in the spring. Our next session is going to be on training resources that we've put together, which hopefully will be ready for December, and all the resources over this term, we'll put them together and get everyone for a kind of pre-Christmas evaluation, chat, rant, debrief next session. So that will be at mid-December. And then Thursday is our webinar for young film programmers. And we're focusing on LGBTQI+ programming this month. And there are some watch party recommendations, but as heard, we'll get some free ones going on before then and send them out. So if you can encourage your young programmers to check out and register for that webinar, it's an hour where I'm interviewing Melanie Iredale from the Sheffield Doc Fest, and there's about half an hour for them to ask questions. So it's half an hour Q&A and then half an hour open to young programmers. So if you can spread the word about that, and then if you want to do a watch party, there's obviously all those ideas, particularly about voting or whatever. If we get a recommendation list each month, that you might follow up with that. And then next month, we'll be looking at a more wider resources to support your young programmers, program in their learning, I guess. And it's interesting what you said, Jess, a little bit more of a steer. And sometimes the ethos of young programmers has very high hopes of their autonomy. However, the young programmers, maybe sometimes the more direction and a little bit of training they need. So hopefully we'll have something for you there that will support that even more. Are there any closing comments, questions, or anything in the last minute?
Can I just ask one question?
Yes, Nicolette.
Where you're directing young people to free, watching films for free, are we just talking about iPlayer, Film 4? Is that where you're choosing your free content?
Well, I mean, the Sheffield Doc Fest, certain places we could try and get some digital free passes. So that is an option. I know that Melanie was going to get a short and get a digital pass that would be free. So we can look into that for some of our speakers. But does anyone else have any other free platforms they use? It was basically the BFI free, the All 4 and BBC. But has anyone else used any others for free streaming?
I apologise, because I was actually supposed to be talking expressly about free platforms, I think, and I didn't really give it much airtime. But I was going to take you to each of the sites, and yeah, BBC iPlayer is obviously a great resource. And if you go to films, within that page, there are sort of subsections of films. So there's silver screen classics, for example, which is quite helpful. All 4 is free. Some of these services you have to register for, but they're free once you get in there. And All 4 has a good selection of short films as well as feature films. So that was quite interesting if you want to kind of use that at some point. And then you've got those subscription services like BFI Player and Mubi, where if they haven't already, people can sign up for a free trial. BFI Player is, I don't quite know how long you get, but it's $4.99 a month after your free trial. And then Mubi is 7 days free.
They do a student one, Mubi.
Right. Yeah.
A student price.
Yeah, I don't know if anyone's got anything to add.
Has anyone got any others?
With Mubi, there's the teacher-student, I think they're still running it. It's called a teacher-student program. So if obviously the student has an academic domain, if they just log in and say what institution they're in, then they get it free for a year.
Oh,
I think it's called teacher-student program. Yeah, it's for like colleges and universities. Yeah,
that's extremely useful.
Just gonna check that out. Because I've got it.
No, they did a student rate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's called.
Okay. Oh, it's 5 years for free. I've got some.
Yeah, that's the one. Yeah.
Oh wow, that's great.
Yeah, because I signed up for it. And it says it expires June 2023. Because I signed up for it in 2018. Great. So yeah, teacher student.
Well, listen, we've run out of time. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming. If there are any more questions, obviously email. I'm going to follow this up with an email with all the resources and a kind of any sort of bullet points that came out. If you want to follow that thread and discuss and chat with anyone. Last session, we had a request to do a follow-up. So if anyone wants to do a follow-up with any of the speakers or do a bit more of a one-to-one, just email it. We're doing the monthly, but if you want to meet more, that's great, but we're going to keep it as a regular monthly slot. It's so great to see you. Good luck in reopening or not in December. And we will have an evaluation and a drinks. The next one, I'm sort of releasing the dates bit by bit, which is not what I normally do. I like to give you an avalanche of information. But I will also, in that email, I haven't got the date to hand, I think the December date for our next one and the next webinar. But I'm just on this week's LGBTQI webinar this Thursday. There's also a Google Analytics webinar that's free from the ICO. So you might want to check that out as well. And there's also the screening days special deal for young programmers with £5 off to enter that event. So again, it's like access hopefully through this online world, which could hopefully support and inspire your group as well as you. So without further ado, thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much to the speakers. If the speakers want to stay on so I can say thank you, that would be great. But if you've got to go and you've gone, that's fine. Good luck. Thanks for joining. And I'll post the recording out there if you want to watch it all again. Okay. Thanks so much. Take care. Bye.